The purple blood pooled beneath Zara's broken wing as she lay motionless in the wreckage of her fighter craft. The twisted metal around her told the story of a battle that had gone terribly wrong. Her squadron had been ambushed by the Krokan Empire's forces while patrolling the outer rim of the Galactic Alliance territory. The enemy had come out of nowhere, their ships like dark shadows against the stars. Zara belonged to the Thylorian race, a proud species known for their exceptional piloting skills and fierce loyalty to the Alliance. Her people had bird-like features with iridescent feathers that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, her normally brilliant blue and gold plumage had faded to a dull gray, a sign of severe injury and despair. The battle had been chaos. Laser fire had lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. Her wingmate, Commander Reth, had been the first to fall when a Krokan destroyer had targeted his ship with a concentrated beam. Zara had watched in horror as his craft exploded in a brilliant flash, taking with it 20 years of friendship and countless shared missions. She had tried to retreat with the remaining members of her squadron, but the Krokans had been waiting for that too. They had herded the Alliance fighters toward an asteroid field, where more enemy ships lay in ambush. One by one, her comrades had fallen until only she remained, desperately trying to navigate through the floating rocks while enemy fire rained down around her. The hit that brought her down came from behind. A Krokan interceptor had managed to get on her tail, and, despite all her evasive maneuvers, a plasma bolt had struck her ship's left engine. The explosion had sent her spinning out of control, and she had barely managed to activate her emergency systems before crashing into the largest asteroid in the field. Now she lay trapped in the cockpit, her left wing twisted at an unnatural angle and her breathing coming in short, painful gasps. The emergency beacon was damaged, its red light flickering weakly before finally going dark. Even if it had been working, she doubted anyone would come looking for her here. This asteroid field was in disputed territory, too dangerous for rescue missions. The Alliance would mark her as missing in action and move on. They couldn't risk more lives for one downed pilot, no matter how skilled she was. The asteroid where she had crashed was roughly the size of a small moon, with a thin atmosphere that would keep her alive for a few days at most. The crash had torn a hole in her cockpit's canopy, but, fortunately, the asteroid's weak atmosphere was breathable, though it tasted metallic and made her throat burn. Zara tried to move but cried out in pain as her broken wing shifted against the damaged controls. She was a pilot, trained for space combat, not survival on hostile rocks. Her emergency kit contained basic medical supplies, but nothing that could help with injuries this severe. The pain medication would only dull the agony temporarily, and she was already feeling dizzy from blood loss. She closed her eyes and thought of her home world, Bylos Prime, with its floating cities and crystal spires that caught the light of their twin suns. She remembered her first flight as a child, when her father had taken her up in an old atmospheric fighter and shown her how the world looked from above. That was when she had decided to become a pilot, to soar among the stars and protect her people. Her family would never know what happened to her. The thought brought tears to her large, dark eyes. Her younger brother was still in flight school, dreaming of following in her footsteps. Her parents ran a small engineering firm that designed navigation systems for civilian craft. They had been so proud when she was accepted into the Alliance Navy's elite fighter program. The asteroid was silent except for the occasional groaning of her damaged ship as the metal continued to cool and contract. In the distance, she could see the debris field from the battle, pieces of both Alliance and Krokan ships drifting slowly through space like a graveyard of metal and dreams. Hours passed, and Zara drifted in and out of consciousness. The pain in her wing was constant, a throbbing reminder of her helpless situation. She had managed to apply some basic first aid, using strips torn from her flight suit to try to stop the bleeding, but she was no medic. Every movement sent waves of agony through her body. As the asteroid rotated, she could see different parts of the space around her through the cracked canopy. Sometimes she saw the distant glow of the system's star, sometimes the cold darkness of the void. She began to hallucinate, seeing her dead squadron mates flying past in ghost ships, calling for her to join them. It was during one of these delirious episodes that she first saw the strange ship approaching. At first, she thought it was another hallucination, because the vessel didn't match any design she recognized. It was smaller than a fighter but larger than a scout ship, with an odd angular design that looked almost primitive compared to the sleek curves of Alliance craft or the brutal efficiency of Krokan vessels. The ship moved differently too, not with the smooth precision of military craft but with a more organic, almost hesitant flight pattern. It seemed to be scanning the debris field, moving from piece to piece like a scavenger looking for valuable salvage. Zara tried to activate her ship's communicator, but the system was completely dead. She banged weakly on the inside of her canopy, knowing it was useless but unable to stop herself. The strange ship was her only hope, even if it belonged to pirates or worse. Anything was better than dying alone on this floating rock. The vessel continued its methodical search through the debris for what felt like hours. Zara watched it with growing desperation, afraid it would leave without noticing her crash site. Her ship was partially buried in a crater created by the impact, and, from space, it might look like just another piece of debris. Then, suddenly, the strange ship changed course and began heading directly toward her position. Zara's heart raced, though she couldn't tell if it was from hope or fear. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself if the newcomer had hostile intentions. She was completely at their mercy. The ship landed with surprising gentleness about 100 meters from her crash site. It was even stranger up close, with what looked like welded plates of different metals making up its hull. It reminded her of the ancient ships she had seen in museums, built before the development of modern manufacturing techniques. A hatch opened on the side of the vessel, and a figure emerged wearing what appeared to be a primitive EVA suit. The being was bipedal and roughly humanoid in shape, but the suit was bulky and crude compared to modern space gear. It moved with careful, deliberate steps across the asteroid's surface, carrying what looked like a scanner and some kind of toolkit. Zara tried to call out, but her voice was too weak to carry through the thin atmosphere. She watched helplessly as the figure approached her ship, walking around the wreckage and examining the damage. The being seemed particularly interested in her ship's engine configuration and weapons systems, which made her nervous. Was this a scavenger looking to strip her ship for parts? But, then, the figure stopped at her cockpit and looked directly at her through the cracked canopy. Even through the bulky helmet, Zara could see eyes that seemed different from any species she knew. They were smaller than Thylorian eyes, set in a face that was flatter and more angular than her own bird-like features. The being made some kind of gesture, pointing at her and, then, at its own ship. It was trying to communicate, asking if she needed help. Zara nodded frantically, ignoring the pain the movement caused in her injured wing. The strange pilot went to work immediately, producing tools that looked crude but effective. It began cutting through the twisted metal that had trapped her in her cockpit, working with surprising skill and determination. The rescue took over an hour, with the being taking frequent breaks to check on her condition and offer her water from a container that had somehow managed to get through the gaps in the wreckage. When she was finally free, Zara nearly collapsed from relief and exhaustion. Her rescuer caught her with strong, steady hands and helped her walk toward the strange ship. She was surprised by how gentle the being was, supporting her weight carefully to avoid putting pressure on her injured wing. The interior of the rescue ship was as unusual as its exterior. Everything looked handmade and improvised, with exposed wiring and jury-rigged systems that somehow worked together. There was no artificial gravity, so they floated through the cramped corridors using handholds welded to the walls. Her rescuer helped her into what appeared to be a medical bay, though it was unlike any sick bay she had ever seen. Instead of the sleek diagnostic equipment found on Alliance ships, this room contained a mixture of devices from different worlds and time periods. Some looked ancient, others appeared to be cutting-edge technology modified for unknown purposes. The being began removing its helmet, and Zara got her first clear look at her rescuer's face. The features were definitely alien to her, though somehow familiar. The being had pale skin, small eyes, and no feathers or scales. Its hair was dark and cut short, and, when it spoke, its voice was deeper than she had expected. "Don't worry," the being said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "I'm going to help you. My name is Marcus, and I'm human." Zara had never heard of humans before, but something about Marcus's manner put her at ease. Despite his alien appearance and the strange ship, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew what he was doing. He began examining her injuries with gentle hands, speaking in a calm voice as he worked. "That wing is definitely broken, but it's a clean break. I can set it and apply a medical cast, but you'll need proper surgery when we reach a medical facility. The important thing is that you're alive and the damage isn't life-threatening." As Marcus worked on her injuries, Zara found herself studying this strange new species. Humans appeared to be remarkably adaptable, if this ship was any indication. Marcus had obviously salvaged and modified equipment from dozens of different worlds, somehow making it all work together. His medical supplies included items she recognized from Alliance ships mixed with devices of unknown origin. How did you find me? She asked weakly as Marcus carefully splinted her wing. I was salvaging in the debris field when my sensors picked up life signs from your crash site. Couldn't just leave someone to die out there, regardless of what species they are or which side of whatever war they're fighting. The casual way he said it struck Zara as remarkable. In her experience, most species were suspicious of others, especially during wartime. The fact that Marcus had risked his own safety to rescue her, a complete stranger from an unknown species, said something about his character that impressed her. "What's a human?" she asked. "I've never heard of your species before." Marcus paused in his work and gave her what she was beginning to recognize as a human smile. "We're new to this part of the galaxy. My people only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. We've been exploring ever since, trying to find our place out here among the stars." The revelation that humans were a relatively new spacefaring species made Marcus's ship and equipment make more sense. Humanity was still learning, still adapting, still building their technology from whatever they could find and understand. It also explained why they weren't part of the Galactic Alliance or any of the other major political entities she knew about. "Are there many of you out here?" she asked. "A few hundred ships, maybe 1,000. We're scattered across this whole region, exploring, trading, learning. Most of us are independent operators like me. We don't have a government or military in the traditional sense. Each ship decides its own course." As Marcus continued treating her injuries, Zara found herself fascinated by this new perspective. The idea of a species exploring space without the massive bureaucracies and military hierarchies that dominated galactic politics was almost incomprehensible to her. In the Alliance, everything was regulated, planned, and approved by committees. The idea of individual ships making their own decisions seemed both terrifying and wonderful. "What do you do out here?" she asked. "Bit of everything. Trading, salvaging, exploring, sometimes helping people in trouble. I've been to worlds no one in this region has ever heard of, seen things that would amaze you. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. There's always something new to discover." The treatment took several hours, during which Marcus told her stories of human exploration and discovery. He spoke of worlds covered entirely in crystal formations that sang in the wind, of gas giants where floating cities harvested rare elements from the atmosphere, of ancient ruins left by civilizations that had vanished long before humans or Thylorians had ever looked to the stars. When he was finished treating her injuries, Marcus helped her to a small but comfortable cabin where she could rest. The accommodations were simple but clean, with a bed that had obviously been designed for someone of her size and species. When she commented on this, Marcus explained that his ship had been modified to accommodate various alien physiologies, as he often found himself transporting passengers of different species. "Rest now," he said kindly. "We'll reach a station where you can get proper medical treatment in about 2 days. Until then, you need to focus on healing." As Zara lay in the comfortable bed, listening to the gentle hum of the ship's engines, she found herself thinking about this remarkable human who had saved her life. In all her years as an Alliance pilot, she had never encountered anything like Marcus's casual heroism. He had risked his life to save a stranger without expecting anything in return, simply because it was the right thing to do. She was beginning to suspect that humanity might be something very special indeed. Zara woke to the smell of something delicious cooking in the galley. Her wing ached, but the sharp pain had been replaced by a dull throb that Marcus's painkillers kept manageable. She carefully stretched her good wing and was surprised to find that she felt much stronger than she had the day before. The sounds coming from the galley were unfamiliar but pleasant. She could hear Marcus moving around, occasionally muttering to himself in what she assumed was his native language. There was a rhythm to his movements that spoke of long practice living alone in space. When she managed to float carefully down the corridor to the galley, she found Marcus standing over a heating unit that looked like it had been salvaged from 3 different ships and somehow made to work. He was stirring something in a pot that smelled absolutely wonderful. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you." "What is that amazing smell?" Marcus grinned and turned to show her the pot. "Breakfast. Or lunch, depending on how you look at it. Time gets a bit flexible when you're living between the stars." The meal he served her was unlike anything she had ever tasted. It was some kind of grain mixed with vegetables and spices that created flavors she couldn't identify but found absolutely delicious. When she complimented him on the cooking, Marcus explained that he had learned to prepare foods from dozens of different worlds during his travels. You pick things up when you're always moving, he said. Different planets, different ingredients, different techniques. After a while, you start combining them in new ways. This particular dish is based on something I learned on a mining world in the Vega system, but I've modified it with spices from 3 other planets. As they ate, Zara found herself curious about Marcus's life as an independent explorer. The concept was so foreign to everything she had known that she couldn't help asking questions. Don't you get lonely out here by yourself? Marcus paused thoughtfully before answering. Sometimes. But I also get to meet amazing people like you. Every world has its own stories, its own wonders. The loneliness is worth it for the discovery. What made you choose this life? Don't humans have colonies, cities, families? We do. Earth has over 10 billion humans now, and we've established colonies on maybe 50 worlds. But some of us are born to explore. It's like an itch you can't scratch until you see what's beyond the next star. Zara could understand that feeling. Her own people had a strong tradition of exploration, though it was always done within the structure of the Alliance military. The idea of doing it completely independently was both frightening and appealing. After breakfast, Marcus gave her a tour of his ship. Despite its crude appearance, she was impressed by the ingenuity displayed in its construction. Every system had been carefully thought out and implemented with whatever materials were available. The navigation computer was a mixture of human technology and systems salvaged from a dozen different species. I built most of this myself, Marcus explained proudly. Took about 5 years to get her to this level. She's not pretty, but she's reliable and she's mine. In the cargo hold, Zara was amazed to see items from worlds she had never heard of mixed with salvage from the battle where she had been shot down. Marcus had apparently spent considerable time in the debris field after rescuing her, collecting anything that might be useful or valuable. Waste not, want not, he said with a shrug. Out here, you never know when a spare part might save your life. Plus, some of this technology is fascinating. Your people build beautiful ships. The compliment pleased Zara more than she expected. She found herself explaining the design philosophy behind Thylorean spacecraft, and was surprised by Marcus's intelligent questions. Despite his primitive equipment, he clearly understood advanced engineering principles. Your people must be incredible engineers, he said after she explained how Thylorean ships could reshape their wings for different flight configurations. The mathematical complexity of making that work reliably in combat conditions must be enormous. We've been spacefaring for over 2,000 years, Zara replied. We've had time to refine our designs. 2,000 years, Marcus said with genuine awe. Humanity has been in space for less than a century. We're still learning how to walk, while species like yours are running marathons. The conversation turned to the war that had brought Zara to this point. She explained about the Galactic Alliance and its conflict with the Krokan Empire, how the galaxy was essentially divided between 2 massive power blocks that had been fighting for nearly 50 years. Marcus listened with growing concern as she described the scope of the conflict. How many species are involved in this war? The Alliance includes nearly 200 member species across about 30,000 worlds. The Krokan Empire is smaller but more militarily focused, maybe 50 species across 10,000 worlds. Then, there are neutral zones and independent systems caught in between. And humans aren't part of either side? I'd never heard of your species before meeting you, Zara admitted. You must be in a region that hasn't been contacted by either side yet. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We've encountered ships from various species, but no one ever mentioned a galaxy-wide war. Most of the aliens we've met have been traders or explorers like us. The implications of this hit both of them at the same time. Humanity was expanding into a galaxy at war, completely unaware of the massive conflict that dominated galactic politics. Sooner or later, human explorers would encounter Alliance or Krokan forces and would have to choose sides or risk being destroyed as potential threats. What will your people do when they find out about the war? Zara asked. I don't know, Marcus replied honestly. Humans don't think alike. Some will want to stay neutral, others will want to pick sides based on which cause seems more just. Some might even try to profit from the conflict. We're not a unified species politically. This led to a long discussion about human government and society. Zara was fascinated to learn that humans had dozens of different political systems across their various worlds, from democratic federations to corporate oligarchies to collective communes. The idea of a species that couldn't agree on a single form of government was both chaotic and refreshing to someone raised in the Alliance's unified structure. "How do you make decisions that affect all of humanity?" she asked. "We don't, mostly. Each world or system makes its own choices. Sometimes they cooperate, sometimes they compete. It's messy, but it works for us." On the second day of their journey, they encountered another ship. Marcus's sensors detected it long before it detected them, and he immediately went on alert. Zara could see the tension in his posture as he studied the readings. "Military vessel," he said grimly. "Configuration suggests Krokan design." Zara felt her blood turn cold. If the Krokans found her alive, they would either kill her or take her prisoner for interrogation. Either option was unacceptable. But she was even more worried about Marcus. The Krokans were notoriously xenophobic and had a tendency to shoot first and identify alien species later. "We need to run," she said urgently. "Krokan forces don't negotiate with unknown species." But Marcus was studying his sensor readings with the calm focus of an experienced spacer. "They're not moving to intercept us. Looks like they're on patrol, probably searching for survivors from your battle. They'll detect us soon. Maybe, maybe not. This ship is designed to have a minimal sensor signature. We might be able to slip past them if we're careful." What followed was one of the most tense hours of Zara's life. Marcus piloted his ship with incredible skill, using the gravity fields of nearby asteroids to mask their engine signature and carefully timing their movements to stay in the Krokan patrol ship's sensor shadows. "You're an amazing pilot," Zara whispered as they drifted silently past the enemy vessel. "You learn to be careful when you're alone out here," Marcus replied quietly. "No backup, no cavalry coming to save you. You either get good at avoiding trouble or you don't survive long." The Krokan ship passed them without detecting their presence, but the encounter had shaken both of them. It drove home the reality that Marcus was now involved in a conflict he had never chosen to join, simply by helping her. "I'm sorry," Zara said after the enemy ship had disappeared from their sensors. "I dragged you into something dangerous." Marcus looked at her with those strange human eyes, and she saw something in them that surprised her. It wasn't anger or regret, but a kind of fierce determination. "You didn't drag me into anything," he said firmly. "I chose to help you. And now that I know what's going on out here, I choose to see you safely home. But your ship, your life as an explorer, will still be there when this is done. Some things are more important than personal freedom." The conversation led to Marcus telling her about human history, about wars her people had fought against tyranny and oppression. He spoke of something called the Second World War, where humans had fought against a regime that had tried to eliminate entire ethnic groups. He told her about the Cold War, where two human superpowers had competed for decades without direct conflict. He described the various independence movements where human colonies had fought for freedom from Earth's control. "Humans have a long history of fighting for freedom," he said. "Sometimes for our own freedom, sometimes for the freedom of others. It's not always pretty, and we don't always get it right, but we keep trying." Zara began to understand that humanity's chaotic, decentralized nature might actually be a strength rather than a weakness. A species that valued individual freedom and had experience fighting for it might be exactly what the galaxy needed. They spent the rest of the journey discussing the war, human history, and what might happen when the two collided. Zara found herself increasingly impressed by Marcus's insights and his people's apparent principles. Haven Station appeared on their sensors as a distant speck of light that gradually resolved into a massive rotating cylinder. It was an independent trading post in neutral space, the kind of place where Alliance and Krokan merchants could meet without shooting at each other. "Medical facilities here are top-notch," Marcus explained as they approached. "They serve everyone, no questions asked about species or politics. Your wing will be as good as new in a few days." As they docked with the station, Zara felt a mix of gratitude and regret. Gratitude for Marcus's help, but regret that their time together was ending. In just 3 days, this strange human had shown her a different way of looking at the galaxy. "I'll stay until you're healed," Marcus said as they prepared to disembark. "Make sure you get proper treatment." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." The medical bay at Haven Station was indeed impressive, with equipment from dozens of different worlds and medical staff trained to treat virtually any species. The doctor who examined Zara was a Vraxian, a species known for their surgical skills. Whoever set this wing did excellent work, the doctor said approvingly. The human who brought you in clearly has medical training. Marcus is full of surprises, Zara replied. The surgery to properly repair her wing was scheduled for the next day. That evening, she and Marcus had dinner at one of the station's restaurants, a place that served food from across the galaxy. It was there that they encountered their first sign of trouble. A group of Krokan soldiers was seated at a nearby table, talking loudly about their search for Alliance survivors. Zara tensed when she heard them mention her squadron, but Marcus remained calm. Don't react, he said quietly. Just keep eating and talking normally. But one of the Krokans had noticed her. The reptilian soldier stood up and approached their table, his hand resting on his sidearm. You're Thylorian, he said in accented Galactic Standard. What's your business here? Before Zara could answer, Marcus stood up smoothly and stepped slightly in front of her. She's my passenger. Medical emergency. The Krokan's cold eyes fixed on Marcus. And what species are you, alien? Human. And you are? Something in Marcus's calm confidence seemed to give the Krokan pause. He was clearly used to intimidating other species, but Marcus showed no fear. I am Sergeant Voss of the Krokan Imperial Navy. This station is under surveillance for enemy agents. Then, you'd better get back to your surveillance, Marcus replied evenly. My passenger needs her rest. For a moment, Zara was sure the confrontation would escalate. Sergeant Voss looked like he wanted to press the issue, but something about Marcus's steady gaze made him reconsider. With a disgusted snort, he turned and walked back to his table. How did you do that? Zara whispered. Bullies are the same everywhere, Marcus replied. They only push as hard as they think they can get away with. Sometimes you just have to show them you won't be pushed. But Zara knew they were in danger now. Sergeant Voss would be watching them, and sooner or later he would figure out who she really was. When that happened, both she and Marcus would be in serious trouble. She was about to suggest they leave the station immediately when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The emergency alarms cut through the restaurant's atmosphere like a knife, turning casual conversation into panicked shouts. Emergency lights began flashing throughout Haven Station as automated announcements echoed through the corridors. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile vessels approaching. All civilian ships prepare for immediate departure. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his hand on Zara's good arm. We need to get to my ship now. But Sergeant Voss and his Krokan soldiers were blocking their path to the docking bays. The reptilian officer's cold eyes were fixed on Zara with growing suspicion. Around the restaurant, people were running in all directions as the station's defense systems came online. Nobody leaves until I say so, Voss announced, drawing his weapon. Especially not suspicious Thylorians traveling with unknown aliens. Through the restaurant's observation windows, Zara could see ships in the distance. Even without binoculars, she could tell they weren't any design she recognized. The vessels were sleek and predatory-looking, with hull configurations that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Those aren't Alliance or Krokan ships, she said to Marcus. No, they're not, he replied grimly. But, whoever they are, they're coming in fast and they're not responding to station communications. The first energy blast lit up space like a small star. The unknown ships had opened fire on Haven Station's outer defensive platforms, destroying them with weapons that seemed far more advanced than anything Zara had ever seen. Sergeant Voss was shouting orders to his soldiers when another announcement echoed through the station. Attention Haven Station. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. This facility has been claimed by the Nethys Collective. Resistance is futile. The name meant nothing to Zara, but she could see recognition in Marcus's eyes. You know who they are? We've encountered them before. They're from the far rim, beyond explored space. They believe they're superior to all other life forms and have a right to claim any territory they want. The station shuddered as the first direct hit struck its outer hull. Whatever weapons the Nethys Collective was using, they were powerful enough to penetrate Haven Station's shields with disturbing ease. We need to evacuate, Marcus said urgently. This station won't last long against that kind of firepower. But Voss wasn't interested in evacuation. The Krokan sergeant seemed to think the attack was some kind of alliance trick, and he was determined to hold Zara for questioning. His soldiers had formed a perimeter around their table, preventing any escape. That was when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. But, in those few seconds of darkness, Marcus had moved with inhuman speed. When the lights returned, he was standing behind one of the Krogan soldiers, the alien's own weapon now pointed at Sergeant Voss. "Nobody has to get hurt here," Marcus said calmly. "But, we're all going to die if we don't get off this station." Voss snarled but didn't move. Around them, other station residents were fleeing toward the docking bays as the attacks intensified. Another massive impact sent everyone staggering, and some of the restaurant's windows began to show stress fractures. "The Thylaurian is a wanted enemy agent," Voss insisted. "Right now, she's the only military pilot in this room who knows how to fight these Nethi ships," Marcus replied. "You can arrest her after we survive the next hour." A new voice cut through the argument. "He's right." They turned to see Dr. Kess, the Vraxian surgeon who had examined Zara earlier. The tall, gray-skinned alien was carrying a medical kit and looked harried but determined. "I've seen what the Nethys Collective does to captured populations," Dr. Kess continued. "They don't distinguish between military and civilian targets. Everyone dies unless we can mount an effective defense." Another impact, this one strong enough to buckle some of the floor plating. Through the cracked windows, they could see atmosphere venting from one of the station's habitat modules. Haven Station was dying, and they all knew it. Sergeant Voss finally holstered his weapon. "What do you propose?" Marcus released the Krogan soldier and gestured toward the docking bays. "We get to our ships and fight our way out. Together." The journey to the docking bays became a nightmare of emergency lighting, screaming civilians, and structural damage. The station was losing atmosphere in several sections, and emergency blast doors were slamming shut throughout the facility. They had to take 3 different routes as corridors became blocked by debris or sealed off due to hull breaches. Marcus led the way with the confidence of someone who had memorized the station's layout. Behind him, Zara struggled to keep up despite her injured wing, while Dr. Kess helped support her. The Krogan soldiers brought up the rear, their weapons ready for any threat. "How many ships do the Krogans have docked here?" Marcus asked Voss as they navigated around a collapsed support beam. 3 patrol craft, the sergeant replied. "Armed but not designed for heavy combat." "My ship isn't armed at all," Dr. Kess added. "It's a medical transport." Marcus nodded grimly. "My ship has some defensive capabilities, but nothing like what we're facing." "We're going to need a different strategy." They reached the docking bay to find chaos. Ships were launching as fast as their crews could warm up their engines, but many were being destroyed by the Nethys vessels before they could escape the station's immediate vicinity. The unknown aliens had positioned their ships to create a kill zone around Haven Station's exit points. "It's a slaughter," one of the Krogan soldiers said grimly. Marcus studied the tactical display for a few moments, then turned to Zara. "You said you're a military pilot. What's your assessment?" Despite her injuries and the desperate situation, Zara felt her training kick in. She analyzed the enemy formation with a professional eye, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. "They're using a standard blockade formation," she said. "For ships in a diamond pattern, designed to catch anything trying to escape. But they're overconfident. They've left gaps in their coverage, probably because they don't expect any real resistance from civilian craft. Can we exploit those gaps? Maybe. But we'd need coordination between multiple ships, and we'd need someone willing to act as a decoy to draw their fire." Sergeant Voss stepped forward. "My ships can serve as decoys. Krogan vessels are built to take punishment." It was a generous offer from someone who had been trying to arrest her minutes earlier. Zara found herself reassessing her opinion of the Krogan soldier. The medical ship could evacuate civilians while the military craft provide cover, Dr. Kess suggested. "That could work," Zara agreed. "But we need someone to coordinate the escape who understands both Alliance and Krogan tactical procedures." Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the sensor displays. "What if we don't try to escape at all?" Everyone stared at him. "What do you mean?" Voss demanded. "I've dealt with the Nethys Collective before. They're arrogant and they follow predictable patterns. They always demand surrender before attacking, and they always try to capture facilities intact for their own use.
That means they won't destroy the station's core systems. Zara began to understand where he was going. You want to retake the station. I want to turn it into a weapon.
Haven Station has industrial fabricators, power generators, and defensive systems that are offline but not destroyed.
If we can reach the control center and restore power to the right systems,
we could use the station's own defenses against them, Boss finished.
The Kroken's reptilian features showed what might have been admiration. It's insane enough to work.
Dr. Kess shook her head. The control center is in the station's core, behind multiple blast doors and security systems. And even if we could reach it, none of us are engineers qualified to operate those systems.
I am, Marcus said simply.
Human ships use similar technology, just on a smaller scale. And I've studied this station's design during our stay here. Another massive impact rocked the station, and they could hear the groaning of stressed metal throughout the structure.
Whatever they were going to do, they had to do it quickly. The Nephi's ships will board the station soon, Zara said.
They'll want to secure it before more Alliance or Kroken forces arrive.
Then, we split up, Marcus decided. Sergeant Voss, take your men and delay any boarding parties. Dr.
Kess, get the civilians to the emergency shelters and try to treat any wounded.
Zara and I will head for the control center. You're injured, Voss pointed out to Zara.
You should go with the doctor. I'm still a military officer, Zara replied firmly. And I'm the only one here who knows Alliance fleet protocols.
If we're going to call for help, it has to be me.
The journey to the station's core became a race against time. The Nephis Collective had begun boarding operations, and the sound of energy weapons echoed through the corridors. Emergency blast doors were sealing automatically as the station's systems tried to contain the damage, making their route increasingly complex. Marcus led the way through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that weren't on the station's standard maps. His knowledge of the facility's hidden passages was remarkable for someone who had only been there a few days.
How do you know about these routes? Zara asked as they crawled through a ventilation shaft.
I always study the places I visit, Marcus replied.
Never know when you might need an emergency exit.
They emerged from the maintenance areas near the station's central command complex, only to find their path blocked by Nethi soldiers. The aliens were tall and pale, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to shift and flow like their ships. They moved with an eerie synchronization that suggested they were somehow linked mentally.
We can't fight our way through, Zara whispered. There are too many of them.
Marcus studied the enemy positions for a moment, then smiled.
We don't need to fight them. We just need to distract them.
He produced a small device from his toolkit and began making adjustments to it.
Emergency beacon, he explained. Modified to broadcast on the frequency the Nethis use for their internal communications. When I activate this, it'll jam their mental link for about 30 seconds. 30 seconds isn't long enough to reach the control center. It is if we're fast enough. When Marcus activated the device, the effect on the Nethi soldiers was immediate and dramatic. The aliens staggered and began firing wildly in all directions, their perfect coordination shattered by the communications interference.
Marcus and Zara sprinted past the confused aliens, reaching the control center just as the jamming effect wore off. The massive doors sealed behind them with a satisfying clang, buying them precious time. The control center was a cathedral of technology, with displays and control panels covering every wall. Most of the systems were offline, but Marcus went to work immediately, his hands flying over the controls with practiced efficiency. I'm restoring power to the defensive grid, he said. But I need you to contact your fleet. Tell them Haven Station is under attack by an unknown hostile force. Zara activated the long-range communications array and began broadcasting on Alliance emergency frequencies. She identified herself and gave a quick situation report, emphasizing the advanced technology and aggressive tactics of the Nethys Collective. The response came faster than she expected. This is Admiral KYTH of the Alliance 3rd Fleet. We're detecting your transmission and moving to assist. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like an eternity, but Marcus was making progress with the station's systems. Defensive turrets that had been offline for hours suddenly came back to life, tracking and firing on the Nethys vessels with deadly precision. How are you doing this?
Zara asked in amazement as she watched the tactical display show Haven Station's weapons engaging the enemy ships.
Pattern recognition, Marcus replied without looking up from his controls.
All technology follows certain logical principles. Once you understand the patterns, you can adapt. The Nephis ships were clearly surprised by the sudden resistance.
They had expected to capture a defenseless station, not face a coordinated defense. One of their vessels took heavy damage and began withdrawing, while the others spread out to avoid the station's fire.
But the aliens weren't giving up easily.
They began targeting the station's weapon emplacements with surgical precision, trying to disable the defenses Marcus had restored.
They're learning our firing patterns, Zara observed. We need to change tactics. Marcus nodded and began rerouting power through different systems. Can you handle the defensive coordination while I work on something else? Zara took over the weapons control with the confidence of an experienced military officer.
Even with her injured wing, she was able to direct the station's fire more effectively than the automated systems had been doing.
What are you working on?
She asked as she targeted one of the Nephis ships. A surprise, Marcus replied cryptically.
Something I learned from studying human naval history. 20 minutes had never felt so long.
The battle raged around Haven Station as more civilian ships attempted to escape and the Nephis collective tried to complete their conquest. Sergeant Voss and his soldiers were fighting a running battle against boarding parties throughout the station, while Dr. Kess worked frantically to save the wounded.
Then, the Alliance fleet arrived.
5 ships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, their arrival coordinated with military precision. The lead vessel was a heavy cruiser that immediately opened fire on the nearest Nephis ship, while smaller destroyers moved to intercept any enemies trying to escape. But the Nephis collective had one more surprise. Their ships began combining, flowing together like liquid metal to form a single massive vessel with firepower that dwarfed anything in the Alliance fleet.
By the stars, Zara breathed. I've never seen anything like that.
Marcus looked up from his controls with grim satisfaction.
Neither have they. Fire the mining charges. What mining charges?
Haven Station is built into an asteroid rich in metallic ores. The mining equipment includes shaped charges designed to break up rock formations.
I've just rigged them to detonate simultaneously. The explosion that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen.
The asteroid that formed Haven Station's foundation split apart in a controlled manner, creating a cloud of metallic debris that expanded outward in all directions. The massive Nephis ship, caught in the debris field, suddenly found its shape-shifting abilities working against it. The metallic particles interfered with its molecular cohesion, causing parts of the vessel to solidify at random intervals.
Now!
Marcus shouted into the communications system. All ships target the enemy vessel while it's destabilized.
The Alliance fleet didn't need to be told twice.
Every weapon in the flotilla focused on the struggling Nephis ship, hammering it with concentrated fire until its exotic hull finally gave way. The explosion when the enemy vessel died lit up space for thousands of kilometers in all directions. When the glare faded, nothing remained of the Nephis collective's forces except expanding clouds of gas and debris. Haven Station was badly damaged but intact. More importantly, its people were alive, saved by the unlikely cooperation between Alliance, Kroken, and human forces. As rescue ships arrived to evacuate the wounded and begin repairs, Zara found herself thinking about what had happened. In the space of a few hours, she had seen enemies become allies, military doctrine thrown out in favor of improvisation, and a single human turn a desperate situation into victory. How did you know that would work? She asked Marcus as they watched the rescue operations through the control center's windows. Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since she had met him, he looked tired.
I didn't. But humans have a saying, fortune favors the bold. Sometimes you have to take crazy risks to achieve the impossible.
As if to prove his point, a new message arrived on the Alliance command frequency. Haven Station, this is Captain Vrel of the Kroken 4th Fleet.
We're responding to reports of enemy action in this sector.
Zara and Marcus looked at each other. Alliance and Kroken fleets in the same system, with a damaged neutral station between them. Under normal circumstances, this would be a recipe for another battle. But these were no longer normal circumstances. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, and everything was about to change. The silence in the control center was deafening as Alliance and Kroken fleets faced each other across the wreckage of Haven Station.
On any other day, this confrontation would have ended in violence.
The two powers had been at war for decades, their hatred running deep through generations of conflict. But today was different. Today, they had fought side by side against a common enemy that threatened everything they knew about galactic civilization.
Admiral KYTH's voice crackled through the communications system first.
Captain Vrel, I'm reading 5 Krogan vessels in this system.
State your intentions.
Admiral, came the measured reply, we're here to investigate reports of an unknown hostile force. It appears we're too late. Zara held her breath, waiting for the inevitable exchange of threats and ultimatums. Instead, she heard something that shocked her to her core.
Captain, did your forces assist in the defense of this station? Some of my personnel were present during the attack.
They fought bravely alongside Alliance and civilian forces. Marcus was monitoring both fleet communications and the tactical displays. 15 ships total, he reported quietly.
Enough firepower to crack a planet, and they're all just sitting there talking.
The conversation between the two fleet commanders continued for several minutes, with each side cautiously probing the other's intentions.
Finally, Admiral KYTH made an unprecedented request. Captain Vrel, would you be willing to participate in a joint investigation of this incident?
These Nethys collective ships represent a threat to both our civilizations. The pause that followed seemed to last forever.
Then, agreed, Admiral.
But, under neutral oversight. I suggest we request the presence of the human representative who coordinated the station's defense.
Zara stared at Marcus in amazement.
They want you to oversee peace talks between the Alliance and the Krogan Empire. That's not what they said, Marcus replied, but she could see he was as stunned as she was.
Within hours, Haven Station had been transformed from a battle zone into an impromptu diplomatic venue.
Alliance and Krogan engineers worked side by side to restore the station's essential systems, while their military leaders gathered in the conference center to discuss the implications of the Nethys attack. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of moderating discussions between representatives of two galactic superpowers. As the only truly neutral party present, he was the only person both sides trusted to keep the talks fair.
The Nethys Collective represents a fundamental threat to both our civilizations, Admiral KYTH explained to the assembled group.
Their technology is clearly superior to anything we've encountered, and their philosophy of conquest makes negotiation impossible. Captain Vrel, a scarred veteran of dozens of battles against Alliance forces, nodded grimly.
Our intelligence services have encountered similar reports from the far rim. Entire systems going silent, colonies vanishing without a trace.
We assumed it was some kind of natural disaster. Dr. Kess, who had been invited to provide medical testimony about Nethys prisoners, added her own disturbing observations. The captured aliens show signs of genetic modification beyond anything we understand. They appear to be engineered for conquest, with enhanced physical capabilities and what seems to be a collective consciousness. Sergeant Voss had survived the boarding action with only minor injuries, and his account of fighting the Nethys soldiers was chilling. They move like a single organism, he reported. Kill one, and the others instantly adapt to your tactics. They learn from every engagement. As the discussions continued over several days, a picture emerged of a threat that dwarfed the Alliance-Krogan conflict.
The Nethys Collective was systematically expanding into the galaxy, absorbing or destroying every civilization they encountered.
Their technology was based on principles that neither Alliance nor Krogan scientists fully understood, and their military tactics were ruthlessly efficient. We estimate they've already conquered or destroyed at least 50 systems in the past decade, Admiral KYTH said during one of the sessions.
And their expansion rate is accelerating. The question is, what do we do about it? Captain Vrel asked.
It was Marcus who provided the answer that would change the course of galactic history. You unite, he said simply. Not just Alliance and Krogan, but every free civilization in the galaxy.
This isn't a war that can be won by any single power, no matter how large.
The idea was radical beyond anything either side had previously considered. The Alliance and Krogan Empire had been enemies for so long that many of their people had never known peace. The cultural, political, and economic differences between them seemed insurmountable. But the threat posed by the Nethys Collective was equally insurmountable for either power alone.
What role would humanity play in such an alliance? Admiral KYTH asked.
Marcus considered the question carefully.
My people are explorers and traders. We've learned to adapt and cooperate with many different species. We could serve as neutral mediators, help coordinate between different military doctrines and technologies. And what do humans gain from this arrangement?
Survival, Marcus replied bluntly.
The Nephis Collective won't distinguish between established powers and newcomers. When they reach human space, we'll be just another obstacle to be eliminated. Over the following days, the framework for an unprecedented alliance began to take shape.
It would be called the Galactic Defense Coalition, and its primary purpose would be the protection of free civilizations against the Nephis threat.
The negotiations were complex and sometimes heated.
Alliance and Krokan representatives had to overcome decades of mutual hatred and suspicion. There were arguments about command structure, resource allocation, and territorial boundaries. Several times, the talks nearly broke down completely. But each time negotiations reached an impasse, Marcus would intervene with a suggestion or compromise that moved things forward. His outsider's perspective and humanity's reputation for fairness helped bridge gaps that had seemed impossible to cross.
Zara watched these proceedings with growing amazement.
In the space of a week, she had seen her entire understanding of galactic politics turned upside down. The war that had defined her life was being set aside in favor of something larger and more important.
Your people are remarkable, she told Marcus during a break in the negotiations.
We're just practical, he replied with characteristic modesty.
When faced with extinction, cooperation beats competition every time.
The breakthrough came when Dr. Kess presented her analysis of the Nephis technology captured from the battle. Their shapeshifting abilities are based on programmable matter controlled by quantum fields. But the control mechanisms show signs of decay over time. I believe their technology has significant limitations that we can exploit.
Captain Vrel leaned forward intently. What kind of limitations? Energy requirements, for one.
Maintaining molecular cohesion over large structures requires enormous power.
That's why they try to capture facilities intact rather than destroying them outright. Admiral KYTH saw the implications immediately. If we can disrupt their power systems,
we can force them back into fixed configurations, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons, Marcus finished. The scientific breakthrough provided the foundation for a military strategy that both Alliance and Krokan forces could implement. More importantly, it gave the negotiations a concrete goal to work toward. The signing ceremony for the Galactic Defense Coalition Charter took place in Haven Station's main conference hall, the same room where Zara had first encountered Sergeant Voss. Representatives from both major powers, along with delegates from a dozen neutral systems, gathered to witness the historic moment.
Marcus, as humanity's representative, was asked to speak first. Today marks the beginning of a new era, he said, addressing the assembled delegates.
Not because old enemies have become friends overnight, but because all of us have recognized that some threats transcend our differences.
The Galactic Defense Coalition isn't just a military alliance.
It's a statement that free civilizations will stand together against tyranny, regardless of their past conflicts.
Admiral KYTH signed the charter on behalf of the Galactic Alliance, followed by Captain Vrel for the Krokan Empire.
Then, Marcus stepped forward and added humanity's signature to the document, making his species the third founding member of the coalition. But the ceremony was interrupted by an urgent message from Alliance scouts on the rim. 3 more systems had gone silent in the past week, and long-range sensors were detecting massive energy signatures moving toward the coalition's territory.
The Nephis Collective is accelerating their expansion, Admiral KYTH reported grimly.
They may have detected our activities here and realized we're organizing resistance. Captain Vrel studied the tactical displays with professional interest.
How long before they reach inhabited systems?
6 weeks, maybe 8 if they encounter resistance.
The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
Their new alliance would be tested in battle almost immediately, with barely enough time to coordinate their forces properly. Then, we'd better get started, Marcus said simply. The next month was a whirlwind of activity as the coalition prepared for war.
Alliance and Krokan engineers worked together to develop new weapons based on Dr. Kess's research into Nephis technology.
Human explorers used their knowledge of the galaxy's hidden routes to establish supply lines and communication networks. Military commanders from all 3 species collaborated on joint tactical doctrines. Zara found herself assigned to a mixed squadron of Alliance, Krokan, and human pilots. The cultural differences were enormous, but they were united by their determination to protect their homeworlds from the advancing threat. "I never thought I'd be flying alongside a Krogan," she told Marcus as they watched the mixed squadrons training together. "People can change when they have to," he replied. "Sometimes crisis brings out the best in us." The first test of the coalition came sooner than expected. A Nethys advance force struck at an outer colony world, expecting to find the usual disorganized resistance. Instead, they encountered a coordinated defense by coalition forces using new anti-Nethys weapons and tactics. The battle was fierce but brief. The coalition's disruption weapons proved effective at preventing the enemy ships from combining into their larger configurations, while coordinated attacks by mixed alliance Krogan human squadrons overwhelmed the invaders' adaptive defenses. When the Nethys force was finally destroyed, not a single coalition ship had been lost. News of the victory spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in years, the Nethys collective had been defeated in open battle. More importantly, the victory had been achieved by former enemies working together under human coordination. The psychological impact was enormous. Worlds that had been preparing for evacuation instead began volunteering forces for the coalition. Species that had remained neutral in the Alliance-Krogan War now requested membership in the defensive pact. As the coalition grew stronger, the Nethys advance slowed and, eventually stopped. Faced with organized resistance for the first time, the collective seemed to be reassessing their expansion strategy. Marcus found himself appointed as the coalition's first Secretary General, a position that would have been unthinkable for any human just months earlier. Under his leadership, the Alliance continued to grow and evolve, incorporating new members and developing increasingly sophisticated strategies for dealing with the Nethys threat. Zara was promoted to Wing Commander and put in charge of training new coalition pilots. Working with humans, she discovered abilities and perspectives she had never imagined possible. Marcus's people had an incredible talent for innovation and adaptation, finding solutions to problems that had stumped Alliance engineers for years. But, perhaps most remarkably, the coalition had achieved something even more important than military victory. It had shown that cooperation between different species and cultures was not only possible but essential for survival in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. Years later, when historians wrote about the formation of the Galactic Defense Coalition, they would mark Marcus's rescue of Zara as the moment when humanity truly entered the galactic community. A single act of compassion by an unknown explorer had set in motion events that would reshape the entire galaxy. The war with the Nethys collective would continue for many years, with victories and defeats on both sides. But the coalition that began at Haven Station would prove strong enough to protect freedom and democracy among the stars, with humanity serving as the bridge between former enemies who had become lasting allies. And it all began with a human who couldn't leave someone in need, regardless of species or politics. Because that, more than any weapon or strategy, was what made humanity special in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors. The HFY spirit wasn't about human superiority or dominance. It was about the very human tendency to help others, to adapt and overcome, to find hope in the darkest circumstances, and to unite different peoples in common cause. These were the qualities that would make humanity's mark on the galaxy, long after the battles were forgotten and the heroes had become legends. Marcus still flew his patched-together ship among the stars, but now he carried the authority of the coalition and the hope of countless worlds. Zara flew beside him often, their partnership having evolved from rescue and gratitude to genuine friendship and mutual respect. Together, they represented something new in galactic politics, the possibility that different species could not just coexist, but thrive together, each contributing their unique strengths to a whole greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy would never be the same, and, for the first time in generations, that change offered hope instead of fear.